Welcome to Crafty Brewers, Tales Behind Craft Beer, the podcast that will increase your enjoyment of craft beer, or maybe you call it local beer, and the people who make it. As they used to say on Must See TV, this is a very special episode of Crafty Brewers, Tales Behind Craft Beer, because as you can tell, for the first time in the auspicious history of this show, we are all remote. There are a lot of reasons for that. Our guests are spread out across the country. Katherine is in Florida, and quite frankly, I can't stand to be in the same room as Cody anymore. But so we are all remote. It's going to be fun. And speaking of Cody, there he is. On this episode, we are going to go from grain to glass with Bhavik and Gator Schrand. They are co-founders of Azadi Brewing in Chicago. We're going to touch on a beer myth and trend, and as always, share the stories that make each brewery unique. I'm beer drinker and Hellraiser Brian Noonan, and all my opinions are strictly my own for good reason. Behind the camera is our aforementioned executive producer, Cody Goff. With me, as always, is the high priestess of hops, the matriarch of malts, the femme fatale of fermentation, the siren of suds, the regent of remote podcasting. She is the co-founder of Exit Strategy Brewing Company, Katherine Vallow. Hello.
Hello. From the swamp. It is so humid here. It's like you go outside and you can just chew the air.
It's humid in Chicago. Gator's in Cincinnati. He said it's humid there. That's why we need a refreshing beverage. What are you drinking today, Katherine?
Oh, I'm excited. So I know that you guys met at Bug when you guys were all together.
We met Bhavik at Bud.
And then Brian and Cody, when they gave me their recap of Bug, were like, we tried this beer and we both agreed we loved it so much, blah, 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 blah. Which, for them to tell me a beer that they loved so much and me also love the beer, I was like, that's cool, because we have different taste buds, obviously. So I am very excited to report that I am drinking Distill's sour pickle beer that you loved so much at Bug. Also, I was very excited to find anything semi-local, old local down here. And when I saw it at the Trader Joe's, I was like, hell yeah, get in my cart. So that's what I'm doing.
Distill is a good, one of these days we're going to get to Distill for one of these shows. I went on an exhaustive hunt because I had gone to Azadi's website, which of course is azadibrewing.com. They brew out of Pilot Project Brewing, which is at 2140 North Milwaukee. So if you want to go there and get some, or you can find it on their website. They have the locators where you can find the beer. And I went on an exhaustive hunt because I had a list. I was going to get a few different beers for us to drink today. However, I do have the Azadi Kavi, which we will talk about. It is I'm going to mispronounce this. I'm guessing this is an Indian spice or cardamom ale.
You're real close.
What is it? Golden ale. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So I'm going to be drinking that. I will start with a sip to get my whistle wet.
Cardamom is one of my most
delicious
favorite things to smell. Like I love cardamom so much.
So we're going to get into what that is, because I'm sure I'm not the only person who is. I love Indian food, but I don't know a lot about Indian beer and Indian spices and all of that. So we're going to get into that. But we usually start out after we, again, introduce our guests, Bhavik and Gator Schrand, the co-founders of Azadi Brewing. Katherine has a myth that we all like to hear. She likes to throw out some myth. Beer drinkers like me who are not in the business probably have believed some of these myths my entire life. People like you guys who are in the business, you may debunk this right away. What do we got today, Katherine?
So this one was inspired by our dear producer who last night, let's keep in mind there's a tiny time difference that nobody actually cares about until it's like bedtime. My phone starts zinging and it's just Cody with questions about coffee beer. And I was like, my guy, it is late. I am old. I am in bed, but I will answer your questions. And then at some point in that text thread came the myth, which is great. And it is something that we should talk about because I do think there's a misconception out there. And the myth today is I can't drink coffee beer at night because it will keep me up. My brain hurts when I say these words because it's nonsensical. And there's a number of reasons for it. The first, and I know you guys also work with black tea and you work with chai and you work with other things that have trace amounts of caffeine. When we put anything that has caffeine into a beer, it can be done in a couple of different ways, right? You can do the dry ingredient. So you can do tea leaves, you can do crushed coffee beans, right? You steep them in the mash. And that will impart trace caffeine. You can also do concentrates, right? So, for example, at one point we did a coffee stout and we used like super high octane cold brew concentrate that we put into the fermenter and we dosed it that way. And even again, you're adding coffee, sure, but this is trace amounts of caffeine to the amount of beer that you're producing, right? So the idea that a beer that might have caffeine in it will keep you up all night is insane. If you're drinking, and it's not insane because Cody said it, because he was texting me so late. It's just one of those like, yes, everybody has a different caffeine tolerance, blah, blah, blah. But the amount of caffeine you're getting from a 12-ounce can or a 16-ounce pour is going to be like a third of a cup of coffee. And I mean, you're grown up. I don't know. Have some NyQuil after that or something if you really got to go to bed.
What do you guys think about that? Yeah, you're the man. I see your pots, and you're the creative beer man with the. That's Bhavik didn't come with any pots. That's how I know that Gator is brewing some stuff.
Yeah, I figured I'd set up where we started it all in my garage.
That's very cool.
And it's also probably the quietest place in my house with 3 dogs inside. So I'm sure you've already heard some of them barking in the background. But I love coffee beers, and I tend to have I drink energy drinks. I don't really drink a lot of coffee though. I don't really like hot liquids. It's a weird thing of mine. I don't know why, but so I don't really drink a lot of coffee, but I love coffee beer. And yeah, I don't really get a buzz from it.
No.
It's
I'm a coffee fan, but I'm not a coffee connoisseur, right? I'm fine with like a Dunkin' Donuts or McCafe, like just for the caffeine rush is what I need.
Yeah.
But if I'm doing something a little bit more kind of high end, I do chai at home. And we do have a chai beer that Gator and I developed with kind of a Indian spice mix that we use for it. So, I mean, yeah, I agree with you. I think it's very factual, Katherine.
Yeah, I mean, debunked. It's ridiculous.
Debunked?
Again,
All right, we debunked
drink
it.
what you want to drink when you want to drink it and be a grown up.
Cody, I drink. The weird thing is, I drink about a pot of coffee every day, but yet I don't really like coffee beers. I don't know what it is. It's me. I'm a weirdo.
Well, one of the things we say all the time on the show too is if you can drink coffee, you can drink a stout, right? So
I like stouts. I love stouts, but
that's
something about the coffee infusion throws me off. That's why I like
it. It won't keep you up at night.
No, it won't keep me up at night unless I'm just questioning my choices, tossing and turning, wondering I wear bad life decisions by drinking a coffee beer. That might do it when I should be just drinking a nice cardamom ale, which I'm doing right now from Azadi. Nice segue to reintroduce our guests, Bhavik Modi and Gator Schrand. They are the co-founders of Azadi Brewing Company, based out of Pilot Project Brewing for the time being in Chicago. AzadiBrewing.com is their website. You can see their whole portfolio, all the information, and it's a really interesting story. As Katherine said, Cody and I met Bhavik at Beer Under Glass this year, and he was telling us about Azadi, and it was one of those things. We left, and I said to Cody, we need to talk to these guys because there is such an interesting way to go. First of all, you guys have been friends for a long time. Bhavik, how did you meet Gator?
The origin story is up for debate,
Yes.
but we met in early in high school. Actually, we played baseball together, had a similar friend group, and have remained friends for coming up on 2 decades now. So
that's amazing. And Gator, before we go any further, Gator is a kick-ass brewer name. Did you adopt this character just when you started brewing, or have you always been a Gator?
No, I have been Gator since I was a baby. I was born with a tooth. I bit my grandpa, and he started calling me Gator, and it just stuck ever since. So my parents, my wife, everybody calls me Gator.
That is a great like I said, a great nickname.
Thank you.
It's hard to know where to start with you guys, but I'm going to start with you, Bhavik, because you were born in India, you moved to the Midwest, but you go back to India. You were going back every year. I don't know if you still do, but you were going back and visiting. And you were, experiencing all the things that you loved from home. One of these visits, you said, sparked the idea for Azadi. What was it about that visit that made you go, hold on, I got an idea?
Yeah. I'd say it wasn't just one thing. It was like three threads of life coming together at once. So while I was working at that time, I was going all across India. And at the exact same time, Gator actually quit his day job, and his wife encouraged him to go to brewing school. So he studied at Cincinnati State. He studied brewing science there. And so in the back of my head, I was like, oh, like my good friend is studying beer. Let me learn a little bit more about beer. And so as I would go through India, I would work from Monday through Thursday, and then I would actually stay 2 extra days, Friday and Saturday there. And as I was going from city to city, I was just noticing this emerging craft beer culture. It's almost like the US maybe 25 years ago. But there, like, you're up against a regulatory environment that's, not favorable for alcohol. There's no labor. No one knows how to brew beer, and you can't get the ingredients. And so basically these brewers were so passionate. They were like, despite all odds, we're going to make it work. And they were using local Indian ingredients and fruits and spices to do it. And it was just so inspiring. And so I came back and I said, hey, look, we should really do something here. And so I met with Gator, and then what we did was we went to the local Indian grocery store. I walked in through the spice aisle. We tried different things. And that was kind of the origin story that brought us together.
Now, Gator, let's backtrack a little bit, because Bhavik just said you were working a straight job. And when did you start brewing before you decided to chuck it all for a life of glamour in the brewing world?
Yeah,
glamour is
so
exactly
glamorous.
the word we use. So glamorous.
Yeah, so I was home brewing a little bit while I was working in IT at an insurance company, and I just wasn't loving the desk job, 9-to-5 life. But I was really passionate about home brewing, and was home brewing with some friends. And my wife noticed that, and she saw an article for Cincinnati State starting a brewing science program. So I applied. I was among the first group of people to go through that program, and we had to get a co-op through the program. So I got I found it really difficult to find a brewery that was willing to hire somebody to just work weekends or just work nights, because I wasn't quite ready to leave my job. And then one day I just had to, take the plunge, and I quit my day job and I started working full time at a local brewery, and it's been that way ever since. So,
wow. See, now and how it has to be crazy important to have your wife be the one who goes, yeah, this is your thing. You seem good at this. You're passionate about it. It's okay. Quit your stable job that probably has a nice 401k and all the other benefits, health insurance and
absolutely.
stuff.
She's been super supportive. That being said, she works with horses, which is her dream. So we're both not working with our degrees, our original degrees, and pursuing our own dreams. So
it's excellent.
It's a good situation for both of us.
I feel like we need like a Celine Dion inspirational song right now, because everyone's like chasing a dream, and it's wonderful, and like that's what we need. Also,
yeah. Well, and that's what it goes to prove. At the beginning of this whole endeavor, we said nobody starts their life as a brewer. Every brewer kind of came to it from somewhere else. Okay, so now Bhavik, you come back from India and you've got this idea. Okay, they're really craft brewing over there. I'm going to talk to Gator. Gator's been home. At that point, were you working in a brewery? Were you?
I was. Yeah.
You was. You were. So Bhavik comes to you and goes, "Listen, Gator, I got an idea. We're going to brew beer, but it's going to have Indian ingredients, an Indian-inspired theme." What's the first thought that goes through your mind?
I've got a lot to learn.
Sure.
This whole journey has been like, I knew a lot about American craft brewing, but Bhavik has been teaching me about Indian culture and Indian cuisine, and that's what's fun about Azadi is it's a good blend of both of our worlds coming together, and it's a constant learning experience for the both of us.
Well, and I think if I could jump in, one of the things that's fascinating about it too is when you look culturally, India has got one of the most complex cuisines out there. It is easily one of the most delicious in the entire universe. But in terms of complexity and the way that like flavors are layered and spice blends and everything else that happens within that cuisine and how important spices are, this, I think what you said is just amazing. Like to take one methodology and then the cultural and bring them together to create this powerhouse is awesome.
It like you said, it's so complex and there's a lot of depth too. Like there's a large smorgasbord to work from and pull different spices and even some of our beers that are maybe a little more traditionally American are inspired. The names and the recipe behind them is inspired based on a story or a place located in India. So when we lean a little bit more traditional, we try and tie it back to what makes us Azadi.
And Bhavik, I'm guessing when you first come in, as Katherine was saying, the flavor palette is so complex in Indian cuisine. How do you decide what you're going to start with? Because it's like you've got all these colors on your palette. Which one do you say, let's start with, maybe this is going to be the most accessible to a market that's not used to these kind of flavors in a beer?
Yeah. For the listeners that are not familiar, India generally has, it's about 30 different languages in that one country alone. It's 1 billion people, the most populous country in the world. And if you go from north to south, every state that you go through is going to have a completely different cuisine. Like in the south, it's coconut and rice based. In the north, it's grains and saffron and all these different things. And so what we try to do when we're kind of bringing that flavor palette to beer is actually focus regionally or culturally. So we'll say, okay, well, this beer is going to be focused on a particular part of India. So the beer you're drinking, Brian, it's called Kavi, which means poet. It's actually the newest design of it. And that cardamom comes from the southern part of India. So we get it from a place called Kerala. They're known for growing that particular spice. There's some beautiful tea gardens and kind of backwaters there. And so that's where we start. So we have a little bit of focus rather than the whole country.
Yeah.
And then we kind of back our way into a specific beer.
And that was our first beer that we ever made.
I was just going to ask that. This was the first one?
Yeah.
So what elements does cardamom add to a beer that may be different from adjuncts that people add in the States if they haven't used that ingredient before?
Cardamom is super strong. I actually just recently redid a homebrew batch of it to try and tweak it a little bit. But it adds a very floral and lemony notes, and a little bit of like pepper in there, but not much. But the funny thing is, on a 5-gallon homebrew batch, we use 2 single pods of cardamom, and that's it. And
they're tiny and strong.
We scale that up, but it doesn't take much at all to really bring out that flavor.
Is it a collaboration when you guys get together to come up with the recipes? Because you mentioned you had a summertime chai, and you've got a rice lager, all kinds of different things. So do you two sit together and, Bhavik, you say, I want to go with this region and this is what they're kind of known for. These are the ingredients I think we should do. And then Gator's like, all right, let's see if we can, how does the production go from idea, from grain to glass, so to speak?
It's a little bit of both, right? So the way Gator framed it was perfect in that, like, we're bringing together Indian kind of culinary culture with American craft brewing tradition. And so sometimes it's Gator that comes to me and he says, hey, we should do like a Belgian quad. And I might say, oh, well, maybe we should add some dates or something kind of interesting to that beer. We brewed one of our anniversary beers was called Hira. Other times I'll work with a restaurant partner, maybe in Chicago. So we actually partner with some local restaurants. There was a Nepalese restaurant actually that made a grapefruit inspired dish. And so I kind of tried it out, and then I took it to Gator and I was like, hey, Gator, so like, here's some of the things that go into this recipe typically. And then he goes into his lab and he kind of figures it out. And so it really goes both ways. But just like any innovation, it's both of our ideas kind of coming together.
Nice.
Yeah. I like to look at it as like, what's the star of this beer? And Bhavik will often come to me and be like, hey, can we use this ingredient somehow? And like, how can I, style is going to best highlight that ingredient, or I'll go to Bhavik and be like, I really want to work with, this ingredient. How can is there some sort of Indian cultural tie that we can bring that in?
Oh, okay.
So it, like Bhavik said, it works both ways.
Cardamom is one of those things I find it to be like lavender, where like you could just wave lavender over something and you're like, that's enough.
Yeah.
Instead
absolutely.
of like, here's the tablespoon of lavender when you just get crazy. I feel the same way about cardamom. Like, oh my God, I'm just going to pass it over because it's strong and delicious and warm. I'm just going to pass it over like orange juice in a mimosa.
Gator, before you started working with Bhavik, and you were what were the beers you were brewing the most? Like whether you were home brewing or when you started working at a brewery?
That's a good question. So my favorite type of beer to drink is IPAs. Okay. However, I think my favorite type of beer to brew is more of like a saison or farmhouse style ale, because I think it's just there's a lot more subtlety, and I really like the finesse of it. So which is kind of where Kavi comes in. That started as a beer to guard recipe, but it's hard to market a beer to guard. So
what does that mean for those of us who are not in
that's
the biz?
A French style, and I believe it's the translation is a lagered beer. I'm not certain on that. Don't quote me, please. But
it's too late. We recorded it, Gator. It's going out to everybody.
Yeah.
Bhavik is making notes.
But our first beers we did, it was actually kind of a funny story. The way Pilot Project works, and they were kind of new as well. We were one of their first clients, but basically they kind of work on like a Shark Tank style audition. So when we were looking for places to brew, we knew that we wanted to kind of find a contract brewery, and we discovered Pilot Project, and it seemed like a really good fit. And we had to originally the plan was to start working with them like in September, and this was early in the year. And then they came back to us and said, we just had a spot open up. Can you get us 3 home brews in the next like 3 months or something? So I had to brew 3 beers back to back first try, and just send them up and hope it worked out. And that Kavi is one of them. Gear, which is our mango IPA, and Kadak, our chai stout, were our first 3 beers that we ever made.
Wow! And Bhavik, what did you drink before you started Azadi? What was your style?
Yeah, I actually was not a huge beer drinker before Azadi. So my influence every weekend I would spend in the kitchen. Actually, I love to cook, and so I had a huge collection of Indian cookbooks, and I was just making different recipes all the time. And alongside that, I was really passionate about local craft beer in Cincinnati. So at the time that Gator and I were kind of in our collegiate years, Rheingeist was kind of booming at that time. And so a lot of the beers out of Rheingeist I loved, Mad Tree Brewing. And so some of the original kind of Cincinnati craft brewing kind of houses were the places that I would always kind of sample from. But I was certainly not doing a lot of exploration beyond kind of what was locally available at that time.
Well, this is the time when we take a beer break. And when we come back, it's going to be dealer's choice for Bhavik and Gator to talk about maybe you've got a new beer coming out of Azadi. Maybe there's one you want to talk about and tell people you got to go to Pilot Project and try this one. We're going to take a quick beer break, and then we'll come back and we will have more with Bhavik Modi and Gator Schrand, the co-founders of Azadi Brewing Company in Chicago. And we are back with Bhavik Modi and Gator Schrand. They are the co-founders of Azadi Brewing Company. Right now, they're brewing out of Pilot Project Brewing, which is at 2140 North Milwaukee Avenue. We've been to Pilot Project before, but we are remote today because Gator is in Cincinnati. Bhavik is in parts unknown. He won't give us his location. He's very secretive. And Katherine, of course, is in Florida. And I am in a green blob. That's all you need to know about this episode. This is when we come back and we let dealer's choice. So Bhavik and Gator, you're going to whatever beer you want to talk about. If there's something at Azadi that's coming out that you're excited about, or one of your portfolio, like people really need to taste this beer. I'll let you guys decide who starts.
I can start, Gator.
You go for it.
There's two beers that I think Gator is probably going to mention. The other one we're really excited about. One is called Jago. The other one's called Cochin. I can talk about Cochin maybe. So Cochin is our lemongrass saison. And what's really cool about this beer is anytime we can, we try to partner with farmers, entrepreneurs back in India. And so for this beer, we actually work with a small batch female-owned farm in the Himalayas. And the project is basically designed there to help women that, unfortunately didn't have the opportunity to get an education, build a self-sustaining life. And so they farm lemongrass, they freshly pick it, and then we actually DHL it. So one of our more expensive beers, and use it for a beer called Cochin. So it's a limited release beer we do.
My God, my heart is.
When is that? You said limited release. When's it? Is it out now? If people go to Pilot Project
right now, yeah.
Okay, very nice.
You can get it at Pilot Project, several Benny's locations, and then we'll be widely available at several Whole Foods locations starting this fall as well in November.
Excellent. You had a question, Kat? You were getting very excited, Katherine, as Bhavik was describing this beer.
I heard so many words that made me so happy. So I heard lemongrass, and then I heard saison, and then I heard woman owned, and then I heard sustainable, and then I heard like self-sustaining life. And I just like I was like the Grinch whose heart got too big. Oh my God.
Yeah, I love that beer. That's one of our best sellers for sure. It's one of my favorites. Absolutely.
How would you describe for people may have had a saison, and there's so many different beers that call themselves, every saison tastes different.
Yeah.
Every adjunct makes things taste different. So how would you guys describe your lemongrass saison?
I mean, I'd say the lemongrass really brings a very refreshing note. And the tea helps kind of like smooth things out a little bit. So I think it's a really approachable saison. I think sometimes saisons can be intimidating and confusing, but I think the lemongrass really, like I said, it's the star of the beer, so it's something you can anchor on, and it's just a great refreshing summer drink.
Yeah,
sounds good.
The funny story behind it is when we brewed it, is the first time we brewed it was in Gator's garage, and we actually went to a local Asian supermarket and got some fresh lemongrass, and because to actually use lemongrass, you have to pound it, right, and kind of smash it together. So we were just in his garage hammering lemongrass and using it in the beer. And so we got some funny origin stories with the
Yeah, the tea is a lot better. It's a lot easier to infuse into the beer than the hammered lemongrass in my garage. So
how did you partner up with this farm in the Himalayas? That sounds like a story where I was hiking on the trail and all of a sudden I came across these women and they had lemongrass.
It's actually a really interesting story. We worked, our beer, it's called Summertime Chai, is a collaboration beer with the brewery in Mumbai, India. And this was one of the entrepreneurs that was really inspiring to me. He's over the last 10 years, he's really been building India's craft beer culture. And so I asked him, I said, hey, we're trying to get black tea for this Summertime Chai beer. We're trying to get lemongrass for this other beer. Is there anyone you know? And he's the one who really kind of made some introductions and connections for us because we wanted it to be sourced out of India.
Very cool. To me, I know all the breweries here collaborate. To collaborate from Chicago with a brewery in Mumbai seems like a heroic kind of thing. Like, how does that logistically? How does that even happen?
It was really cool. To make things easier for both parties, we brewed the same recipe at each of our locations. There was no shipping in between. But the challenge behind that made it a lot of fun because they had certain limited resources. We had limited resources. So we had to come up with a recipe that would work for the both of us. And that's where Summertime Chai came from.
Wow.
It was a really cool project.
And the seasons are flipped in India too. So while we're in the summer and enjoying Summertime Chai, they're in monsoon season. And so we called it that Summertime Chai here. They called it their Monsoon Chai Ale in Mumbai. And so people got to experience that there and something different here.
Bhavik, can you explain chai because you had to explain it to me how it doesn't necessarily, because the American profile thinks of chai as one thing, right? But Bhavik, if you would.
Yeah, I mean, chai directly translates to tea. And so there's cardamom chai, there's lemongrass chai, like there's all sorts of different teas that are available in India. And, with the Starbucksification of the world, basically people think of the chai as a chai latte. It's a sugary drink. But even when they try our winter brew, it's called karak, which is a chai stout. It's a 100-year-old chai recipe that we actually got from a family friend in India that we use in that beer. They tasted like this is nothing like a chai latte. You get kind of the spice characteristics of chai without kind of the creaminess, the sugariness that comes through from it. And so, we try to also educate people with each beer. And when you buy our beers, often you'll see just on the back of a can, like a little story and a description that talks about where the beer comes from, what it's inspired by, and tries to educate while also folks enjoying that beer.
Hey, Gator, what was the beer that you were going to tell us about?
Yes,
because Bhavik said there were two.
I've got one right over here. I'll grab it real quick.
It's behind the scenes.
Meanwhile, I just need one of Gator's headsets. That looks awesome. But then I couldn't have my mic flag.
So the other beer is called Jago, and it's our chicory amber ale. The cool thing about this beer that we do every year, we work with a local Chicago artist who redesigns our label every single year. It's a different design. And so this is not this year's can. This is an old can. But and Bhavik, if you wouldn't mind shouting out the artist, give her some credit.
Yeah. So we work with the Indian fine artist in Chicago. Her name's Jenny Vyas. She's done the artwork outside of Federales, Brew, many different restaurants.
Oh, okay.
Old Orchard as well. And so every year we actually try to feature kind of a local Indian origin artist. And so she's the artist we've been partnering with for now, going on 4 years now. And so in the fall, we released this beer. It's inspired by South Indian filter coffee. So coming back to our original question, in India, we make a very specific type of coffee. It's almost like a concentrated like espresso with notes of chicory inside of it. It's very famous in the South. And so that was the coffee that inspired this beer. And it's been quite popular since.
Her her exhibit when we were working with her was called Awaken. And Bhavik, correct me if I'm wrong, but Jago translates to
awaken. Yeah. And so the name of the beer translates to the name of her art exhibit that we partnered with.
It's incredible.
I didn't know anything about chicory until I started to go to New Orleans, and they add chicory to their coffee down there. For those who have heard the term, maybe they've been to Cafe Du Monde and had a chicory coffee, what exactly is chicory, and what does it add to an amber ale? Because I love amber ales. So what am I going to get when you put that chicory in there?
Yeah, chicory's got kind of an interesting history to it. So the French were one of the colonizers in India. So you had the Portuguese, the French, and the British. And the French were part of a place in India called Pondicherry. And obviously there's a huge French influence in New Orleans. And when coffee got expensive, they would basically add a chicory root inside of it to kind of mimic the look of it, but maybe not the taste. And eventually people started liking that flavor. And so that, I'm sure over centuries kind of came to India, came to New Orleans. But it adds, kind of like a earthy kind of herbal kind of note to the beer. It's really interesting, in my opinion. It's kind of a woody, nutty taste that comes through. I don't know, Gator, if you've got other characteristics you noticed.
I mean, you pretty much nailed it. When I first wrote that recipe, we had recently just done the chai stout. And what I didn't want to do was just another coffee stout. I wanted to do something, another kind of dark beer, and tie in coffee in a way that was, uniquely Indian. So I thought this was a good way to approach a coffee type beer without going down the coffee route.
It sounds very cool. Bhavik, you mentioned that part of Azadi is you're trying to educate people with every beer. You have the stories on the label, all that, because it is, I mean, just here, I think I've been educated to a lot of things, so it's cool. When you first started and you get to pilot project and your beer's on tap, is there a hurdle as far as like teaching people? Okay, hey, yeah, this is kind of like Gator said earlier. This is kind of a traditional style, but we've jazzed it up and made it with all these Indian influences, and trust us, you're going to like it. It may sound different, or you might not have heard of a certain ingredient, but you're going to like this.
Yeah. I mean, what we say is that we're going to be an unapologetically Indian brewery, right? So
Nice.
My wife does our label art. Everything's Indian about that. The name of each beer is Indian. The story is Indian. And, Gator and I just believe it's our job to open kind of the tent of craft brewing to a bigger audience. And that goes both ways, right? On one side, it's educating traditional beer drinkers through Bug and other events, through tastings of, hey, why don't you just try this out, right? What do you think about it? And I'd say 9 times out of 10, people are like, wow, this is really good. We've never tried this type of mango that you're bringing in from India, or this type of spice. Wow. We just did a tap takeover this past week at Monk's downtown, and you had the after work crowd. And goodness, like people loved the beer, but it was their first love for a lot of them. It was their first time trying some of these ingredients.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side of it, we think it's our joint mission to introduce the Indian Americans to American craft beer too. And so we try to promote Chicago craft breweries. We try to educate people of like, hey, there's so many great breweries around town. We might be your entry point, but we think that you can kind of expand and kind of build a more diverse community in craft beer that way as well.
Yeah, and when we first started, I think there was some hesitation about choosing Indian names for our beers, or names that were hard to read. We, weren't sure how that was going to be interpreted. And I think what we've learned over the years is we do better when we dive in and don't hold back and just commit to who we are as a brand. And that's what people relate to, and that's what people like the most. So we've really committed to that.
I think there's something to be said for not caring, not in the bad way, but in the I can't care so much about this because I need to stay true to the thing that we're doing, right? So that holds more water, especially to like consumers who truly, truly, truly want to get into a scene and really understand a beer, right? So like not caring about the little stuff and caring about the core values. It's great. And it's a wonderful message Steven sent to just everybody.
No,
yeah, I was going to say, you can't be everything to everybody, right? And so
Never.
For us, like we found kind of our niche. We're really passionate about it, and it's worked for us.
You can
one
be
of my
everything to
favorite
yourself, and that's about it, and that's great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
One of my favorite lines of beer that we do that Bhavik taught me about is we decided we needed to do some hazy beers. We need hazy IPAs. However, those we started the Hill Station series, which was our line of hazy IPAs. Now, these IPAs are more traditional in the American sense. There's not a ton of ingredients in there that are necessarily Indian. However, what we did was we decided to tell a story with the branding. So, Bhavik, if you could take over and talk about the Hill Stations and how that connects to our brand.
Yeah, I mean, India's hot just generally as a country, and they have all these kind of mountain resort towns called hill stations. So to escape the summer heat, you kind of climb up the mountains. And as you go up the mountains, it gets a little foggier and hazier weather-wise there. And so India's got 150 or so of these hill stations. So each beer is named after a different hill station resort in India and the fruits that you find there. And so one of our beers, Manali, which is out right now, it's in the northern kind of Himalayan mountain region, and it's considered the fruit basket of India. So we selected hops based on what fruits are found in that region. The name of it is there. And then even on the label, you can kind of see that hill station's characteristics there. So that's the story behind it.
You know what? It makes me feel better about drinking beer when I'm learning stuff too, because I'm not wasting my time. Check this out. I'm enjoying myself. I'm having some beers, and I'm learning about it. Mr. Hand, having some pizza, learning about the Constitution. It's terrific. All right, we always ask brewers the same 3 questions. Now, these may be a little different, but we're going to ask you the same 3 questions, and I'll ask a question, and then the first one, Bhavik will answer first, then Gator, and then the next one, Gator and Bhavik. I feel like I'm hosting a game show where we get it all going. But here is our first question from the big 3. It is the hill you'll die on. Maybe it's a style that people really love, and but you, just for whatever reason at Azadi, no, we're out. We're not doing it. Bhavik, you're on the clock.
Oh goodness. Style-wise, what do we avoid, Gator? I feel like because we're we've done 35 beers so far, we've experimented with a lot of different styles of beers. It's tough for me to think. I think the one thing that we sometimes will avoid are just really, I guess, like traditional kind of straight down the line beers that don't have anything kind of authentically Indian about them. And so one of the beers we did a lager at one point, and just like didn't work, right? And to Gator's point, there wasn't anything unique about it. We didn't really have like a good kind of Indian backbone to it. And so for us, I think it's got to be authentically Indian for us to go into the style, but we're very open-minded.
You got a style that you're praying that Bhavik never goes, hey, I need you to brew a blank.
Yeah, I do. But I've always told Bhavik I'm never going to say never. But I am not a seltzer guy, and I know it's not beer, but
no, that's
don't want to do it. I don't want to. I'll never say never, but
I've heard that one quite a bit.
I really don't want to do it.
All right. Yeah. Question number 2: a beer that you brewed that might have been really popular, you might have loved it, customers might have liked it, but for whatever reason, you're never brewing it again. Oof. Gator, we come to you.
Oh, wow. Okay. So Indian beer, Indian food goes really well with Belgian wits. Okay. We have tried to work on a Belgian wit recipe that is unique, that plays with some different Indian ingredients and stuff, and I just have not been able to figure it out. So like the current version of the last one we did, I didn't love it. It was good. It was good. It wasn't my favorite. And we will not do that version of it again.
Wits can be tricky.
Very nice.
Bhavik,
you got one?
I do. So the Hill Station series that I mentioned, the aim is that we use experimental hop combinations to create the juiciest beer possible. One of our beers is called Lay. Supposed to be a hazy IPA. Didn't end up being super hazy, but goodness, customers loved it. It was almost like a tropical beer. And I don't think we would do it in the same kind of way. Again, we might rebrand it. We might do it differently. But that was one of the beers where we'll try something new. We tried a different yeast on that one, but it just didn't work out the way we wanted it to.
Yeah. All right. And our final question, your go-to off-the-clock beer. It could be one of yours. It could be something else. Bhavik, you're first this time.
I personally love our Dusra. It's a basmati rice lager. It's our most popular beer that we do. It's just clean, crisp, 4.2%, easy drinker, and something I just enjoyed with my friends.
Very nice. Gator?
I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble for going off Azadi brand here, but my intro to IPAs was Deschutes Fresh Squeezed. That was kind of that's kind of was my gateway drug to IPAs, and I still love that beer. So that is my go-to whenever I can.
Very nice. Well, I want to thank Bhavik Modi and Gator Schrand. They are the co-founders of Azadi Brewing Company. They're operating out of Pilot Project Brewing, which is at 2140 North Milwaukee Avenue in Chicago. AzadiBrewing.com is the website. Now, Katherine always has a trend too, and she invites you to explore a trend with her. Where are we going today?
What's nice today is that we've already bucked the trend, which is why I thought this was something interesting to talk about. We have seen, market share and consumerism kind of lean toward more boring beer lately, and that's been nationwide. That's this thing of like, I just want a lager, man. That's all I want. I want to and that's fine. Listen, lagers are great. They have their place, not in my mouth, but in other people's, fine. But I think that trend in this episode specifically has been so well destroyed and like just going against the grain of that trend, which is wonderful to see, because when we trend cast, right? And we're like, all right, well, we swung real high into all these high ABV, like even 8-9% hazies, right? Or these milkshakes that got way up there, or these high stouts. And then we're like, all right, well, we've done that. Now we've got to swing the pendulum back down. We've got to hit these lagers, and we got to hit all this low ABV stuff. And that's fine, and that's great. It's hard to predict when we can go back to interesting. But what I love about you guys and what Azadi is doing is that it's essentially, and I'm going to swear big, Cody, bleep me if you need to, but fuck the trend. Because it doesn't have to be that. We can take things and meld them together. We can take rich cultural tradition and meld it with traditional brewing like style and how we craft a beer. And we do that well here in this country. We don't do much. There's other things we don't do so well, but we brew beer well. So when we can bring those two things together and say, I don't actually care so much about this trend and what's going on out there, because like we just got done saying, the most important thing is to stay true. So when it comes to trends like that, do you even pay any attention to them? I mean, I happen to think that kind of stuff can be a little bit like restrictive and almost make you think too much. Like, where do you guys land on that?
I can start. For us, I mean, trends tend to look at backward-looking data, right? Of who has traditionally consumed beer in the last few months, what are they consuming today?
Right.
And for us, we just think that there's a much larger consumer base that's yet to be tapped in craft beer. And so we're almost creating new trends, and we're trying to create a bigger group that might not know about a beer. I think of the quote attributed to Henry Ford, right? If I'd asked customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. And so sometimes, people just, build on what they know, but if they haven't discovered something yet, then they don't have no idea that they're going to like it. So it's our job.
Thank you for speaking to my Detroit roots.
I want to ask you guys one question quick before we end. I know you've done the collaboration with the brewery in Mumbai. Has anybody that you've worked with in India come over and tried your beer, and what's the reception been by brewers in India to your stuff?
There's a underground market for smuggling our beers to India back and forth, actually. So we do get quite a bit tourist population that comes through the tap room for pilot project in Chicago, and also their space in Milwaukee.
Yep.
And several people actually will, ask people to grab their beer, fly it to different places. I know today there's a case that someone grabbed that they're taking to Mumbai. So it happens quite often, actually. So
that's excellent. That's excellent. Well, thank you guys again for being here, and thanks everybody for joining us on this episode of Crafty Brewers Tales Behind Craft Beer. Be sure to support your local brewery like Azadi. Without your support, sometimes it's rough going for your favorite breweries. Crafty Brewers Tales Behind Craft Beer is produced by award-winning podcast producer Cody Goff. You can grab some merch, check out episodes, and get in touch with us on our website. That's craftybrewerspod.com. Do you have a brewery that you really like and you'd like us to talk to? Or are you a brewer like Bhavik and Gator and you think, well, they didn't do too bad with those guys. We'd like to come on the show too. Well, you can drop us a line, craftybrewerspod@gmail.com. Speaking of merch, Katherine, what are we featuring today? And I know you have a special shout out as well.
I do. I have a couple of things. I was going to say we can do mine, but mine's from the retro collection. We did that one already. So I think today's featured merch, just because I'm feeling myself right now, is our Don't Be a Dick shirt.
Wow.
I feel like that just is a wonderful, just don't be a dick, right? It's just sage advice for the whole wide world. And I feel like we need it. Yeah. So that's our featured. You're welcome. And then, I need to do a quick shout out to, everyone's favorite maltster. Everyone I know uses them. We all know them. We all love them. They are an incredible maltster to work with. Country Malt Group. This will air before we do our thing in August, but Crafty Brewers is co-hosting the brewer-only Bloody Mary bar at Oak Park Microbrew Review.
Yeah, man.
Our co-sponsor is Country Malt Group. This is the second year that they are jumping in. It was originally the Exit Bloody Bar for Brewers, and then it has morphed into the Crafty Brewers Bloody Bar for Brewers, along with Country Malt Group. They are sponsoring that with us. We love them. We love all of their malt. We love everything they do. I mean, they're fabulous to work with. And they're local and they're great. So that's my CMG plug
Very good.
for today. I know.
How about the socials? Can people follow us on socials?
They sure can, buddy. Yeah, so you can find us on Facebook. I know. Crafty Brewers, Tales Behind Craft Beer. We are on Instagram, crafty_brewers_pod. We're all over the place. I've been a little lax on posting, but we're still there. Don't worry about it. Yeah, so follow. And then as long as we're talking about socials, while you are following and when you see something that you like and when you are listening to an episode and doing all of those things that you do all day long on your phone, share. Your friends are already looking at what you ate for dinner. They're looking at your dog. They're looking at your kids. They can look at the podcast that you're listening to. They're not going to whatever. They don't care. They're already looking at your life. Tell them what you're listening to.
Perfect. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please tap your phone, give us a 5-star rating. Cody said that means something. I don't know. What am I? I'm 90 years old. Who cares? 5 stars, it sounds good. Is that right, Cody? All right. Well, thanks again to Bhavik, Modi, and Gator Schrand from Azadi Brewing, azadibrewing.com. You guys were great. Thanks for being here. Your story, I'm going to say this just to upset Katherine. It did not disappoint.
I hate you.
It was on fire. It was everything we hoped for and more. Thank you for being here.
Any other phrase in the world.
I know I could have, but I chose not to.
You're a little spicy. You're a little spicy.
All right. For Crafty Brewers, Tales Behind Craft Beers, she's Katherine Vallow.
He's Brian Noonan.
I never disappoint. Any last words?
Keep your relationship with your couch private. Good stuff.